Okay, so I just want to actually start off by you just telling me a bit about yourself, man. How old are you? Where are you from? And yeah, then we can take it from there. Then I want to know a bit about your journey, how you got to where you are now, and why you chose the path that you're on now, and why you're doing what you're doing on social media and in your life, and so on and so forth. So yeah, let's start there, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name is Danny Avalos. I run the page Virtues Over Vices on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and I'm from Alberta, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a pretty snowy, cold place up here.
Gotcha.
But yeah, basically my journey was for the majority of my later teens and early 20s until not too long ago. Pretty degenerate, secular, atheist, liberal, all the not so fun stuff of life, pretty
Fun in the wrong
degenerate.
way, right? Fun in the wrong way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
the good stuff.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
But definitely more common, I think a path that most young men can probably relate to nowadays.
So tell
Um,
tell me like what kind of stuff were you into, man? Like let's get into it. Let's relate
I
to the
definitely
people out
wasn't
there, man.
as outgoing as some. I was never a club guy, drinking every night guy, mostly because I didn't have the money to be at the clubs and stuff like that. But um, since a very young age, I was addicted to porn.
Yeah.
So about 10 years, I was addicted to porn pretty severely. So that was pretty much the beginning, the catalyst for everything. Started having premarital sex at a pretty young age. And again, that was the catalyst that led into like a degenerate lifestyle, just always in casual relationships, having girlfriends, and then if I didn't have a girlfriend, was in other casual things. So that was probably my main vice per se. Just lots of intimacy and not intimate in any emotional way. It was very lustful. So very damaging to my confidence, very damaging to my self-esteem. Kind of just looked at myself and other people like a piece of meat. And then a couple of years ago, I, much after most people, usually most guys and girls, they start smoking weed or experimenting with drugs, maybe in like early high school, at, college age. But when I was already about 22, I'd never smoked drugs. I was very against it, but I was in a very bad place mentally. So, and I hung around with some people that were smoking weed. And if you don't know, in Canada, it's legal.
It's legal.
So,
All right, man. Sure.
yeah. So just like on every corner there's a liquor store, I know every corner there's a cannabis dispensary.
All right.
Um, so it's very accessible. So I started off doing that and I became very addicted to it. It was a very prominent crutch in my life. And yeah, those were probably the two main things. But in general, throughout the years of about 17, 18 up until about 23, um, I struggle with both of those, along with just disordered eating habits, being really unhealthy, really low self-esteem. I always liked going to the gym and I always was somewhat athletic, but those years I definitely let myself go. And, as a man, when you look in the mirror, you don't like the way you look, you feel really bad about yourself, and especially if you're not really motivated or have a very good catalyst for change to actually go to the gym to do that because it's hard to get in shape and be positive and implement those habits when you're watching porn, smoking weed, eating pizza every night, and those are your habits. You've been building those habits for a really long time. And so I was really stuck in that lifestyle for a long time, on dating apps, watching porn, all this stuff, really, really unhealthy, like quick shots of dopamine all the time, very instant gratification lifestyle, living a dead end 9 to 5 and just living for those. When am I going to get my next joint, my next burger, my next, nut? Like it was not a fun time.
Chasing the temporary pleasures of life. And now
Absolutely.
I appreciate what you're saying in the beginning, and I just wanted to take the conversation back there. But what you're describing to me and to most people out there sounds like an average teenager's life. So why did you shift away from that? Like what made you start to think that this is not what it should be, you know, if you get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, Not that I think I'm all that great, but I definitely always felt that it was bad. Like unlike a lot of my friends or a lot of young men, like I would hook up with a girl and I would feel like almost suicidal after because of how bad I felt. I hated that feeling because deep down I knew that I just wanted to be with one person. That's why I preach
Mm,
monogamy very, very hard.
sure, sure.
Even before coming to Christ, I was raised Roman Catholic, so I had Christian morals instilled in me, from birth pretty well, pretty deeply, and I think that's where I get a lot of that morality, and that's why I was very against drugs, very against drinking, and I knew that I didn't want to have meaningless sex, but my flesh and my morality, my soul, my brain, my values, my beliefs of like, I don't want to do this. I fundamentally believe everything I'm doing is wrong, but my flesh was so, my flesh, my mind, and the dopamine driven part of my brain that just wanted an easy life didn't care enough about that, right? So that's why I think it was such a battle for me. Whereas for most guys, like that's just my early 20s, bro. That was a normal couple of years for me. That's just how we lived. For me, it was a constant battle of I don't want to do this. I don't want to be this guy, but I'm still continuously choosing to be this guy
So
because choosing to not be this guy would be way harder, right?
So it sounds like to me that you're saying, if I could reflect back, what you're saying is that it sounds like you were going against your inner values or your values. And you could
Exactly.
feel that when you were doing it, even though you weren't aware maybe what your values were like 100%, but your gut instinct, there was some part of you that knew that this isn't helping me or aligned with who I really am or who I really want to be. And that part of you was pushing you or making you feel bad about your decisions.
Exactly, and I knew for sure this wasn't the way I wanted to be, but it was the way I was for so long. I just got so used to just doing what was easy, even though it didn't go with how I wanted to be. And every time I tried to be that person that I wanted to be, a virtuous, good man, the guy that was in shape, the guy that had a successful relationship with a girlfriend, all these things failed. So I was like, it's just better for me to take the easy way out,
Mhm.
even
And by
if the
easy, you
easy way
mean
out.
porn, quick fixes,
Exactly.
nothing
The
big,
instant gratification.
instant
Even
gratification.
though I knew that wasn't who I wanted to be, and it was
Sure.
fundamentally going against my values of, monogamy and virtue, I said, well, it is what it is, right? Like, what am I going to do? So I couldn't find the strength in myself to change. And yeah, I tried many, many, many times. I can't tell you how many times I tried to quit porn. And
Mm.
I think that's the story for how many guys, how many times have we all relapsed? How
Mm.
many times have we said, oh, this week I'm going on a diet. I'm going to get shredded. I'm going to get jacked. And then,
2 days
we
in, that.
exactly, I ate a whole pizza, so
Yeah, that's pretty hectic, man. Yeah, yeah, I can relate to a lot of it. I mean, with myself as well, growing up, just in the Western, you can't even call it culture. Me personally, I don't think the West has a specific culture. We're just like a mix mash of so many different ideologies and ideas that's why I believe there's a lot of confusion and no one actually showing us anything specific is because everyone's just like, yeah, just, take a little bit of everything, believe in a little
Mhm.
bit of everything. And coming from someone where I found my spiritual path, as I'm sure you have as well, when I look back at that type of thinking, I'm just like, that's crazy, man. That you're like dispersing your energy so much. It's like being engaged in so many less efficient activities, that you don't have energy for your spiritual path at the end of the day, because you're believing one thing and you're believing another thing, you're engaging in this activity and then in that activity, and you ask someone, hey man, so what do you believe? Yeah, I think I'm a Buddhist. Which is a lot of what people say in today's day and age. I think I'm a Buddhist. And they're like, okay, so what do you do? And they're like, I don't actually do much. So it's like, but that's not Buddhism, is it?
Yeah.
That's not a spiritual path, is it? And they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
but I never really thought about it. I just like the sound of it, you know? And in my
Yeah.
opinion, that sort of wish-washy thinking is what's led young people like you and myself and many men and women out there into less efficient habits. I'm not going to say they're good or bad. I'm just going to use the term, like, it's not efficient. It's not a good. It's not an efficient way or a positive way to spend your energy. And now I wanted to ask you, on a personal level, why did you start to change? I mean, what led you to get that strength from outside of yourself? And where did you go, and what were you looking at, and what were the things that were in front of you at that time when you realized, like, I need to change, but like, I don't know how. So what did you start to do?
Well, for a long time, like I was a pretty devout Christian in my youth, you know, like because I still had to go to church with my parents and stuff, so you get influenced. But once I got into high school, I kind of just left that behind. I think like most any 14-year-old would say, I'm good. I don't need God, right?
I
And
know. I know.
so I was pretty atheist, I would say. You know, I was very just angry in general, an angry teenager, adolescent. And so, of course, all during all this time, I tried to do it on my own strength. And honestly, throughout many years, it just got worse and worse and worse. And in some ways, it did get better. I'll speak on this more in one of my reels for sure. But I did mention that I went to the mental hospital for a little bit. I went to the psych ward for about 3 weeks. Like it was a very severe. Like I don't know many people who were in a situation quite like mine.
Mm.
But that was a couple of years ago, and by the grace of God, even before believing in Him, I did get better. But then it got worse than better, and then it kind of got worse before it got better.
Mm.
And so in the past couple of years, I was kind of in this relationship that with a very nice girl, but I felt trapped, and I trapped myself in that relationship, in this situation. And it was a very difficult situation for me to leave because I felt like it was my responsibility to take care of her because she was very, like me, broken at the time. She relied on me for everything, and basically, it's just not a great situation for me. We both fed off each other's addictions. We
Mm.
were creating an environment for each other to thrive in these degenerate activities. Even though I don't think we were meaning to be bad, but you kind of
You fall
it's like
into
that
each
trauma
other's,
bond.
yeah,
Yeah,
trauma bond.
yeah,
Yeah, you
that
fall
trauma
into
bond
each
relationship.
other's sphere of whatever you have going on, and you just get so caught up in it,
Exactly.
and then it's like
Like
hard to
these
break
two young
apart. Yeah,
people who were broken
yeah.
kind of just were like, "Hey, I hate life. You hate life. Let's just like be
Make
together
life
and like
together.
yeah, exactly."
Sure.
And I was like, I don't want this. I want to quit. I want to do all these things. And basically, I got to a point where I was um, so desperate for change. I realized if I didn't change now, I probably would never change.
What age
And
was this, man? What age were you at?
23.
23. Oh, so just a year ago.
Yeah, just the big like just not too like about 7 months ago or so, I'd say.
Sure. Okay.
Honestly, this was when the big change happened. Where I turned to God, and because at this point I wasn't believing, but all around me I saw people who were Christians, who were believing in God, that their lives were great. They believed in God, they took their strength from Him, and the fruits of that were evident. And
Mm.
I said, wow, like these people actually have something to believe in. Um, and it's going somewhere. Their lives are bearing good fruit. And I said, well, what do I have to lose by turning to God? I guess, I was so desperate that I realized I had to make a change right there and then, but I couldn't do it on my own. So finally, I humbled myself and I said, like, I need your help. And it was from that point on, that things did change. And I know for most people, just doing it once is not going to be like that, And it definitely was not easy. I would say it was easier per se than all the times I tried to do it on my own because I didn't feel alone.
Mm.
But like anything, it was excruciating, and people ask me what's your number one tip for quitting porn or quitting anything. And all the workouts and the cold showers in the world aren't really going to help if you don't have a strong enough reason why, right? In order to create long-lasting change, especially from habits that you've spent so long building, there has to be a strong enough catalyst, and I had a reason why for a long time. I understood and I was very passionate about, while being addicted to porn, about the negative effects of it. It was ruining my life. It ruined my life for years. But when you're addicted that long, it feels impossible.
Mm. It's
But
like I built this whole kingdom on porn, and now I have to unbuild it or destroy it somehow.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It was really hard, but it's definitely possible, and you need to have, like, it's that cheesy quote of the pain of staying where you are has to outweigh the pain of what I know it's going to take to get there. The pain of what I knew it was going to take to transform my physique to get better. Of the pain of what I knew it was going to take to quit weed and quit porn, cold turkey, um, which was excruciating. It was definitely the worst pain I've ever felt, but it ended up giving and bearing the most fruit that I would ever experience in my life, right? I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. And it's only through that I knew I would be able to, if I ever wanted to help any other, because I had this idea that I did want to help men. I
Mm.
wanted to help men go through what I went through, but I had to do it myself first, of
Mm.
course, right? So that was pretty much how it happened is, but it wasn't just a one-time thing. I turned to God and then everything's good for the rest of my life. I'm chilling, right? It's a decision I had to make every second of every day, which
Mm.
which is something also I say about addiction is that you don't make the decision. You make the decision once and you don't turn back, but you it's a decision you have to continuously make every day, right? Because how many times in a day, especially if you're severely addicted, do you get that urge? 10,000 times a day, every second that you're awake, how many of your thoughts are just do it, just do it, just do it, right? Just smoke, just cheat on your diet, just go have a drink, just go sleep with this girl, etc. Right? And every second of the day, you have to be able to deny yourself of that, to
Mm.
know that there's more, and that you have to replace that with other things, you know,
More
and that
positive things. Yeah, yeah. That's
exactly,
that's
you know,
something that I've definitely taken away from my own journey. I mean, I've been on my spiritual path. Well, definitively, like when I made the actual choice to follow something specifically, I've been doing it for about 6, 7 years. So I've been in
mhm,
my culture, my religion, and my spiritual path for about 6, 7 years. But before that, I was on a spiritual journey, but I wasn't looking. I was looking for things, but I didn't know what I was looking for. So I was just bouncing between things. But anyway, so
yeah,
so so when I chose something specific, that's definitely helped me to have a lot more traction moving forward. It gave me that stronger um, clarity within myself that this is what I want. So now how
right,
do I align the rest of my life in order to fit what I want with my spiritual life, Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. All of the other things in life are secondary to the relationship that we have with God. Because at the end of the day, when
absolutely,
you die, that's what you have. You have nothing else. You have no
exactly.
money. You have no relationships outside of yourself. You have no fancy house, fancy car, fancy nothing, no Jordans, no, fancy this, fancy that. It's just your relationship with God. And so, yeah. So coming back to the point of surrender, to God, or to a higher power, or whatever your belief is, not yours specifically, but whoever's listening. It's, I often thought, and I came to this point in my mind often that, I'm just surrender, just do it now, do it, get it done, and just do it. And I would from a sincere place, but I came to that same realization where I realized that it's actually an everyday thing. It's an every moment thing. It's actually a practice. It should be something that we practice every single day, because in this world, there's so many things that are going to inflate our own ego. I mean, in the Bible, you call it Satan. In different beliefs, you call it whatever, the illusion. But our ego, especially as men, we get a very big ego very quickly because we have a very large false ego. It's just a part of our chemical makeup. And so when we get a little bit of something, it's like, yeah, I did that. Woo, woo, woo. It was all me. But then comes the practice of surrender and realizing, no, actually, that was God's mercy. That was the divine's mercy. I'm just a vessel for that to have taken place right here and right now. But ultimately, it was God who sent it to me. And so I need to honor that. And I need to, respect it as a gift from God at the end of the day. And that's what helps, personally, that's what helps keep me in line when I feel like I'm getting a bit too overconfident with what I'm doing, because it happens. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Overconfidence is it's not a bad thing. It's just, can you then humble yourself? As you said, can you humble yourself enough to be like, okay, I need some help. I need some help. I am a man. I am faulty. I am flawed. Can I accept some help from someone? Can I accept some help from God? Can I lower my false ego enough to admit that I can't do this by myself? Because even on a spiritual path, even though we have found our connection, we still have to rely on other people, not just God himself, because, God works through other people all the time. So, even if we think we're an island, I can do this by myself. Oftentimes people think I can manage my addictions. I can manage this. I can do it all by myself. And that's when you start to get a bit too far down that rabbit hole where it becomes like a deep, dark place. And now you're caught and you're like jerking off all the time. And you're like, no, I can manage it by myself, or, you get in a bad relationship or an unhealthy relationship. And you're like, no, I figured it out by myself. But then you end up getting stuck in it even worse. And that's where things get really dangerous, is when we don't, as a man, like surrender that side of ourselves and actually admit, like, I need to rely on something higher than myself. I need to rely on other people, and having strong people around us, even just one person, two people, that you can trust, that are on a similar frequency or even more advanced than us in a relationship with the divine or on a spiritual path, that can shoot us forward so much more, but coming back to dealing with things like, for instance, when I was younger, I used to smoke cigarettes, right? I used to do weed. I used to do a lot of things. I mean, but just cigarettes was the main thing, in my opinion, and it was one of the hardest things I had to go through in giving it up, because I smoked every day for 8 years. I mean, I was smoking 20 cigarettes a day. I was rolling my own cigarettes. I was smoking a lot of weed. And I oftentimes came to this thought that, because I would do it even when I was sick, right? So I would have like a flu, I would have a chest infection, all that stuff. And then I find myself having a cigarette and I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, I'm sick. I could physically feel, like you said, how bad it felt to be doing this, but still somehow I convinced myself I need this. And then eventually I started to realize, like, this is not an act of self-love. And even more as a man, it's not an act of self-respect. I'm not respecting myself. Because in the Bible, in my text, the body is a temple. It's something that is to be used in service. And here I am, like, I'm disrespecting this gift from God. I'm disrespecting this vessel I have that I can use to serve other people and God by damaging it and not loving it and not taking care of it. Because it is the first temple. It is our first church. If we cannot keep this clean, if you cannot take care of this, how are you going to take care of other things in your life? And so, yeah, that's one of the main things that pulled me through smoking cigarettes, was that thought that every time I do this, I'm really doing all of what I just said. And that to me was like that reason why was like a big push to actually get through it and to keep it at a bay and just be like, boom. Because even now I think about it, I'll think about it. It's been like 7 years since I smoked a cigarette, but often it will just pop in my mind and I'll be like, but I'm not
Oh
going
yeah.
to do it. But it just pop in my mind and be like, cool. But I know I'm not going to do it. I will never go back to that, because the reason why is stronger, or the what I've realized around it is stronger than the actual addiction itself. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's great. That's a really good way to think about it, and that's very honestly, that's a very biblical way to think about it. That's great. Um, I completely agree. Like, um, it's crazy how much our flesh and the things that we want of this world will just literally go against a logic, complete logic, But I mean, that's where reality and society is at this point, right?
Being run on
We
desires, right? Just
moves.
every desire we
Exactly.
get, we have to fulfill it because we're not taught that maybe we should, like conserve that energy for something more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, that's true that it doesn't matter how long you're gonna go every day, porn and weed and binging always pops in my head, but it's just the thought just gets easier, and I have a video coming out about lust. Like lust as a man, that does not go away ever, right? Lust is one of the seven deadly sins, and it is part of our nature as men to lust, right? Um, but we just have to face it, and of course not face it alone, right? Because if we do, we'll lose for sure, and yeah, absolutely, I completely agree. And honestly, what I had seen is well, I have a mentor who's in this space as well, and he was one of the reasons that kind of made this possible for me, he tried to plant little seeds of Christianity in me, and I was like, nah, bro, Jesus is made up,
Not
bro.
that
Get
one.
out of here.
Not that one, bro.
I'm like, get the fuck out of here. But honestly, it started to kind of become more apparent and clear. Again, the fruits of his life, and you look at people you want to have like a life like, right? You look at the people that are a couple steps ahead of you, and you look at their steps, right? And so I realized that why I turned to God, it wasn't just this epiphany, right? And the light shone down from heaven. It was, I've tried everything. I've tried everything to quit, everything, but I haven't tried you yet. So I guess what do I have to lose at this point, right? And I do agree that you have to be very clear of what you believe in. A lot of people don't, and that's a lot of Christians as well, especially younger Christians, but even old, very lukewarm, right?
Lukewarm. You're in, but you're out. You're like you're
Yeah.
in, but I'm not bashing Christians. I speak to a lot because I speak to a lot of people, man. I go out on the streets and I preach my religion, and I
Mhm.
speak to a lot of Christians through that. And I will ask someone, I'll ask specifically Christians, but do you read your Bible? And they're like, yeah. But like why? I mean, you can call yourself a Christian, but then are you really like practicing to be a Christian? Because if you're practicing to be a Christian, and I'm telling myself this as well, you have to read. How else do you develop your relationship with God? Like you can't just have this spontaneous relationship all the time. Like there's a definite
Mhm.
need to put in that structure into a relationship, because at least in my culture, in my religion, God is a person. So if you
Yeah.
want a relationship, if I want a relationship with you, I have to dedicate time to that. I have to dedicate effort and energy into building that, because at the end of the day, it's us here in this world that have forgotten our relationship with God. God's energy is always there. He's providing the birds, the bees, the honey, the milk, the plants, the fruits, the nuts, the grains, the whatever you want. He's doing all of that, the rains, the sun.
Yeah.
That's all there by his design. But we're the ones that are just like, oh, yeah, it's cool. It's there. You know,
Yeah. He has not forgotten us. We have forgotten
we
him.
have forgotten him at the end of the day. Yeah. So that's
Exactly.
it's,
And it's
yeah.
a relationship that, like any relationship, I can't say we're friends and I talk to you once a year and then that's it. right? And I talk to you when I need to, when I
Oh,
want
I
some
need
advice.
something.
But
Yeah, yeah.
exactly, like that's something you have to continuously do every day, like
It's
right?
a
Like a
it's a plant
relationship
you
with
water,
God
yeah, every
as
day.
a
Yeah,
person on earth,
yeah.
right? You got to speak to him. You have to give thanks and, have that give and take per se, And yeah, I know that's absolutely spot on. And you have to be clear on that. And like you said, like it just sounds nice. It sounds nice to say, yeah, I'm a Christian.
I'm a
It
Christian.
looks
Yeah, yeah.
nice to wear a cross around your neck, but what are you really doing?
Mm.
And I'm not saying you have to go and become a priest in order to be a Christian, but of course, right? Like I can't say like I use this analogy, I can't say I'm a power lifter, but I never go and lift a
You never go to
weight.
the gym.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it
sure.
just sounds cool to identify yourself as
Yeah.
something, but you don't actually put any of it into practice, right?
But that doesn't mean like for me, that doesn't mean you can't be someone who has a relationship with God and struggling. Because
Of course. Of
that
course.
doesn't a struggle doesn't take you out of your relationship with God. It can actually,
No.
if you view it with the right mindset, it can deepen your relationship with God or with the divine or whatever you want to call it.
Depending how you take that struggle,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I mean, I think it's definitely, are you, like a lot of lukewarm people do, is are you using it as an excuse to sin, or are you
Mm.
actively just trying to not sin? You're still, of course, we're all going to struggle. We all fall short of the glory of God. No one's ever going to be perfect, but are you just like, well, he's going to forgive me, so I can just go and do
Do it
whatever I
anyway, bro.
want? But
People
are you
forget
actively
people
trying?
forget God is not stupid, bro. He
Exactly.
can
He
see
knows all
that.
your
He can see
thoughts.
that
He
he's
knows
the
your
creator of everybody. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So like how
exactly.
is he not going to tell that fake facade from something real and authentic, you know?
Exactly. That's like saying I'm trying to quit something, but I'm only really trying half the time and I'm still going out and smoking, drinking. It's like I'm quitting, kind of, like
Kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah.
you got to be all in. Absolutely. You have to at least put all your effort forward. You're going to fall,
Mm.
but it's the genuine effort that creates that relationship with him, right?
There's a nice verse in one of the books that I read. It says that God carries what we lack and preserves what we have. So
Mm,
whatever effort we're sincerely trying, so that's when you're really trying to put in the effort, or you are putting in that effort. But obviously, we again coming to that point of realizing that we're just naturally imperfect. It's how we're created, right? So we're
yep.
born to be imperfect, so that, in my opinion, and I think maybe in anyway, just in my opinion now, is that we can rely on God because He is perfect. You know, He is
Exactly.
the origin of everything, but we are born, or we're here created with imperfect senses, and therefore we have to rely on something beyond ourselves in order to know or to advance. And that comes back to the point of having good role models as well, who are potentially a bit more who know themselves better and have a deeper relationship with themselves and the world around them and with God, is that those people can show you that what you're trying to overcome can be overcome. And that is inspiring. Like whenever I listen to my role models, whenever I tune into my mentor, he's doing the things that I want to be doing. And I look at that and then I realize that if he can do it, I can do it, you know? But it's only through spending
Absolutely.
time with him and having that association do I actually see that. Because if I just spend time by myself and I think I can do it all by myself, you know, then I don't ever get that window into the fact that it can be done, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and I think that's why, guys like us are in this space to try to show that it can be done,
It can be done. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
You
often
know, if
we're, I mean, I'm not trying to, I'm just stating from where you've come to where you are. You're still like in the beginning phases, you know, you're still like getting the ball rolling and stuff like that.
yeah,
And so the biggest challenges will come, bro. Like
oh, for
there's no
sure,
doubt about
this
that.
is
For
just
me
the
as well,
start.
man. Like, whew,
This is
I
just the
faced them
start,
and stuff, but yeah. So
and I'm just trying to speak to the men who are, and I think generally you should always trying to speak to the guys who are a couple steps behind you or who are there, and in a year I'll be speaking to the guys that are where I am now. It's all
mm,
about this
yeah,
progression,
yeah, 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 yeah. And it's not about perfection. It's not about being perfect. It's about the progress we make, you know, looking at where I
Exactly.
was and where I am now and being like, damn, look how much I've changed and look how much I've developed and look how deep my relationships got. That is the true success in any endeavor, is the actual progress,
Absolutely.
as opposed to all the mistakes. Because if you focus on that stuff, we're all going to be like, damn, I'm so useless, bro, because I make mistakes all the time, man. I'm sure you do. I'm sure even the best people out there, they're making mistakes all the time, man. So
Absolutely. You just have to learn from them, you know, and it's a hard mindset shift to do, but to take those mistakes and actually learn from them instead of just beating yourself up and taking away all the self-confidence you have.
yeah, okay. So just to go over a little bit of what we've said so far is that so
Yeah.
you were just like every other teenage boy out there. You had yourself like enmeshed in a lot of things that you eventually started to feel were like not so good for yourself, you know? And so
Mhm.
you further went down that line because you had no other way. You didn't know any other like outlet for these things. You didn't know you could do anything else with your time and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
so then you basically got to a point of realizing that you needed to make a change, but you didn't know how. And so,
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I mean, I'd say it was a little bit worse than the average boy just because of the pretty severe porn addiction. But aside from that, yeah, you know, like I always wanted to go down that self-improvement path, even
mm,
from a young age, but I felt that I just didn't have it in me. You know, every time I tried, I failed. So with every failure, you know, your confidence just keeps going down and down and down. So eventually I figured, well, I'm never going to be able to be that man I want to be,
mm,
or I don't know how. So I'm just going to stay where I'm at, right? Because I don't know how to get there, right? I don't know how to be confident. I don't know how to overcome these struggles that I'm going through. And I'm constantly trying to overcome them, but failing, you know, and only with every failure, you know, you're like, well, I failed, so I might as well just get deeper in the hole, right?
mm,
Because how do you cope with the feeling of that failure? You cope with your vices, which you failed, failing your vices. You know what I mean? So it's this very vicious cycle that you're trapped in. You know, I'm trying to quit porn. Oh, okay, I relapsed. I hate myself because I couldn't do it. So to cope with that feeling, I'm gonna watch more porn. You know, or you know that binge eating cycle of oh I cheated on my diet. I had a burger. What am I gonna do? Now I feel sad, so I'm gonna have five burgers.
fiber
You know, and you
and
just
watch
keep getting
porn
worse
and
and
go and
worse.
smoke some weed.
Exactly. You know, how do I cope with the feeling of feeling depressed that I can't seem to quit weed? I keep smoking more weed so I don't think about how I can't quit weed,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Instead of
You know?
dealing with the emotions in a healthy way, we suppress them under the thing that we think is going to make us or take it away, but it doesn't. It just makes it worse. Yeah.
Right, right. And me being in the mental hospital and all that, I was in therapy for a long time, and it did help because there was a lot of underlying deep issues as to why all these behaviors came. Like you don't become severely addicted to porn for 10 years for no reason, you know, especially when you start
Mm,
watching it very young. It has a lot of deep psychological effects.
mm,
But and I was able to work through that and develop, I would say, and I've always had quite a bit of like emotional uh, intelligence, just not emotional maturity. You know, I was very self-aware of my emotions and why I felt them. I just didn't know how to actually stop it. You know, I'm like, oh, I feel this way and I do this because of this. That's great. Like you have the understanding and the knowledge, but I'm like, I just don't know how to stop because the feelings are so overwhelming, right? And yeah, and that was basically, you know, I was always my worst enemy, and it was all internal factors, not much external factors. You know, I've had a very very blessed life, especially living in Canada. You know, that's just a privilege in and of itself, right? So, but yeah, and then that was kind of it. You know, you always wanted to be more, couldn't be more on my own, and the only way that I was able to do that was through, you know, turning to Christ as I have, and that's the biggest breakthrough that I've ever had. But like you said, you kind of develop that pride sometimes. I know the effort I've put in and the immense work I put in to get here, but that would not have been possible on my own, you know, and I try to emphasize that in my content is that everything I have achieved and everything I will achieve, the glory is not to me. You know, the glory is not for me whatsoever. And I definitely feel that you develop that ego, right? You want to take a little bit of glory, a little bit, because you did the work,
Yeah,
but
I did it, man. I worked my ass off, bro.
exactly.
And we
But
did,
I
we did. I
know
mean, I
that,
mean, there is credit. There's credit where it's due, right? So there is that
you
sense
know,
of like you did put in the work, but it's a two-way street. It's your effort and then God's mercy, right? So without your
absolutely,
effort, then God's
absolutely.
mercy wouldn't have just sprang out of nowhere. But without God's mercy, your effort means what?
Exactly. I had to open up my heart to him in you know, and humble myself. And he was merciful enough, even though I did not deserve it after everything and the life I'd lived in sin, you know, he took mercy and gave me everything and gave me the strength to be where I am today. And, you know, God willing, where I will be. And, you know, I'm eternally grateful and blessed for that. But, you know, you gotta, it keeps you humble for sure, you know, because all these guys who are, you know, very red pill or secular and they're really
Mhm.
successful, it's all glory to me. They are their own god, right? It's very
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
idolatrous.
Yeah, there's nothing beyond them and their efforts that they, I've worked hard, I've put in the time, I put in the effort, I've been through suffering, I pushed my way through the suffering. And yeah, that's true. But at the end of the day, it's again, it's also by the grace of something beyond ourselves that we even, you know, I mean that anything works, that how the planets float in the universe, there's just it's all divinely arranged by
Mhm.
a higher power. There's this cool analogy where I think it's Isaac Newton. He goes
Mhm.
to his friend and he was like, "Man, do you think that the universe was built by like something grander than ourselves?" And his friend was like, "Nah, it just appeared, you know." And then he was like,
Mhm.
"Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yeah, it just appeared there." So Isaac Newton was like, "Cool, man, cool." So he goes away for a while, Isaac Newton, he does his thing and he starts building this entire little solar system structure in his lounge, and it's spinning and he gets everything to work and all the planets are going around exactly how it does in the universe. And that same friend comes to visit and he walks in the lounge and he's like, "Oh my God, how did you build this?" And then Isaac Newton was just like, "No, it just appeared." Which just
That's
made the
good.
guy like should put it in his face, like, if you think that something this little was like could just appear here, how do you think that a big universe like what we have, as complex as we have, just appeared? It doesn't do
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then with those kind of guys, I mean, when you're as high as the pyramid goes, that's why they believe that they can have anything they want and pretty much create their own sense of
And
morality, which
do
I
anything they want. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, 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 yeah.
touching on in the beginning. You know, you kind of pick and choose what you believe, and you know, there's some people in my comments whenever I talk about Christianity, they're like, "Well, I can create my own sense of morality. Like morality is what I choose it to be," and I'm like, that goes against the definition of morality of a black and white, right and wrong, right? So if you can pick whatever is right and wrong, that's not morality. That's just having an
It's
opinion, you
choice.
know?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it's free will.
like that's not morality
Yeah.
whatsoever, right? And yeah, but I used to believe that as well. You know, I can make my own rules. God's rules are stupid. I can do my own, and you know, I can live on my own. I can figure out my own. I don't need anyone but myself, right? And that's and you also touched on this as well. A lot of guys, they just turn to themselves, right? I can do this all on my own. They get in that very Sigma grind set alpha male type ideology, and it's not good. Absolutely, it's very toxic and it's very damaging for the
You,
mental psyche.
I would like to add in why it can be damaging, because I myself love to be by myself. I love, it's my nature to do things by myself. So I often thought, what's so bad about it? But then I started to realize, through going through phases where I would just be by myself for like a long time, and then coming into phases where I'd be around a lot of people and be connected to communities and stuff like that, is that when you are not connected to those communities in like a healthy way, then you don't have people to check whatever is going on in your mental, emotional space. So you can develop some really unhealthy mindsets about yourself and the way that the world works, because ultimately, if you aren't strong enough to check yourself, which a lot of us aren't, we aren't that aware of ourselves to check every little thing that's going on inside of us, every single belief that we have, and so on and so forth. And that's where having other people like a brother, like brothers or friends or community that you can connect to helps you, because it helps you to stay in line. It helps you to remember what is important at the end of the day. And then also having that independence, because relying too much on other people is not a very healthy masculine thing to do. A masculine man is supposed to be independent. He's supposed to function on his own, through his own will and his relationship with the divine. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a time in your life where it's literally just been you and God. There's been no external help, even though you wanted it, even though you reached out for it. There was no external help except for your effort and just believing that God's going to provide at the end of the day. So there is that balance of both in the experience of being a man. There's the reliance community and then needing to stand on your own 2 feet, because oftentimes people are so absorbed in their own worlds, they don't give 2 flying shits what's going on in your life, man. And they're not going to help, because you should do it by yourself, right? I did it by myself. You should do it by yourself,
Yeah, no, you definitely need that calibration as a man. You can't be all on your own. And of course, you can't be too reliant on other people. You have to be self-sufficient and have that direction, and ultimately rely on discernment you get from God. However, you do need to keep yourself in check. God does help keep you in check, but you need those external factors of good people around you, and specifically good men, specifically, hopefully, men that are maybe a little bit more advanced than you, to keep you in line and to be like, yo, you're on a power trip, buddy. You need to chill out. And that's exactly.
Just take a step back. You think you're here, but you're actually here. So just realize
exactly. You need that accountability, because if you're just in your own echo chamber, especially being a creator, as you grow, you're in this echo chamber of people. Obviously, especially people like me, we're gonna get hate, but you're in this echo chamber. People are like, yeah, that's awesome, that's great, and that's great to have that support. But if that's all you have is your followers and people reaching out to you, you start to get this bit of complexity. You have this God complex sometimes, and that pride, right? Pride is always going to be the downfall. You need people who can really humble you and bring you back to earth, and keep you accountable for those things. Men need that brotherhood. They need it. It's necessary. And I think that's definitely hitting the nail on the head for that, for sure.
Yeah, one brother, many brothers, even if you're just connected to a community of people, that can make a difference in the world. Like, you don't have to have specific, like, good, deep relationships with like multiple people at the end of the day. I mean, it's different for everybody. So some people have that. Some people only have one good relationship. Some people have, a few good relationships. But at the end of the day, like, a lot of people also are not there for your benefit. They're there because they want to cast like a negative shadow over what you're doing, or they're there because they see your light and they don't want it to shine, bro. So it's also good to be aware that these things do happen, and other people are as faulty as anything. So I'm faulty, all those people are faulty. I have my insecurities, I have my jealousies, I have my and other people have those too, and sometimes they're even worse than you could ever imagine. So it's also good to be aware that as we're growing, that not everybody needs to know everything, man.
Absolutely. There's things that you need to keep to yourself, and have a little bit of that, Sigma grind set, like the little piece, the youthful pieces. Useful pieces, right? But you don't need to go full Goggins, Hormozy, work alone type stuff. Like, you have to have that calibration. You can't be all or nothing on each side. You have to know there's time there's a time to work, in Ecclesiastes, book in the Bible. There's a time to work. There's a time to relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor. There's a time to be alone. There's a time to be with others, right? You have to have that discernment of knowing when to do what, right? And have that balance of knowing how much of each to do in each situation, right? Because some seasons of life are going to be different than others. Some
Mm.
seasons you're going to need to isolate yourself and be alone for a
Mm.
bit, but it's
For
not
that
forever.
for that reflective, deeper internal relationship and that internal processing. It's like going into winter for a bear, or an animal that
Exactly.
hibernates. They need that because it's just that season. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
that the whole world is coming to an end, or like, oh my God, I don't have friends, or oh my God, things are going to stay like this forever. Because just like the
Yeah.
seasons, everything changes. And just like
Exactly.
there's so many stories in the Bible itself. I mean, I'm pretty aware of what the Bible teaches, and I know some of the stories, like the story of Job, right? So he
Yeah.
gets tested full on throughout. Like, I don't know the specific details of how long he was tested, but he had everything. He had
Yeah.
he had the family, he had the wife, he had the riches, he had the fame, he had that that precedence, that reputation in his community. He had the land, the house, the animals, the all of that stuff. And then the devil was like, what if I test your boy, God? And God's like, yeah,
Exactly.
do it. Take everything away from him, but you can't touch his soul. And God does that because Job was obviously dedicated to God. That's why how he got everything, hard work and his relationship with God. And God wanted to see at the end of the day, will he still be dedicated to me even when all of that stuff goes away? And lo and behold, Job did do it. And then he just got everything back tenfold. Boom, boom, boom. Because God saw this. He's a man of his word. He said he's going to he's going to stay firm in his faith, and he did that. So why shouldn't I bless him with everything he had and
Absolutely.
more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. It's an amazing book. I'm actually reading that book right now specifically.
All right, man.
It's such an inspiring story and
Mhm.
something that is very humbling. As he giveth, he can taketh away, right? And that's part of life, right? And it's not because God is angry or mean or spiteful, but is it fair to expect all the good things that God will give us and to not expect the bad as well? Because that's part of life. That's part of reality, right? This is the world that we have created with our mortal sin, our free will, our choice.
Mm.
Every day, the choices we make, we create the reality and the world that we live in. So who are we to blame the one that made it perfect for us when we're the ones who made our own decisions for ourselves, right?
Yeah, and how do you say? The way that I see it, at least in the books that I read, there's this idea that comes through that God favors people through giving them stuff, but he really
Mm.
loves the people. He really loves someone when he takes those things away from them, because he actually really he wants a deeper connection, and he realizes that through you having all of these external things, that person's become distracted from me. And so
Yeah,
taking it away is not it's not a punishment. It's not like I'm taking this away because you've been bad. I actually just sincerely want you to deeply connect with me. Just because when you have nothing, that's when you can so much more sincerely connect to God, because you have nothing else to depend on except your relationship with God. No like wealth, no fancy this, fancy that. You just have a relationship with God at the end of the day. And that clarity, that clear connection can come through in those times. And you can say, no, I can do it when I have all that stuff, but it is a bit more challenging. When we're happy,
absolutely.
it's okay to let things slide a little bit. You become more comfortable. Not that comfortability is bad, but you do sometimes too comfortable. And then you become, yeah, then God's like, okay, I'm just gonna retract a little bit, just take a little bit, and you're like, whoa, okay, 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 I'm on my feet again. Sorry about that. I'm back. What do you
Yeah,
need from me? What
absolutely.
can I do? Um, you know, and that's a relationship, right? I mean, it's like every relationship. When we become too familiar with the people around us, we tend to become a bit disrespectful. We tend to not value that person as much. We tend to see them through our own false ego a little bit more. But when that person goes away, then you start thinking, oh my God, I miss that person. Oh my God, I wish I had that. Where is that person? Where, why, you know? And then it's like the relationship is like sweeter when you come back together, because you have that like period where you're like, damn, I really actually took these things for granted, or I really missed the way you cooked that food, or I missed having that, you know, that those moments with you, and so on and so forth. So it's the same with God, the same with the divine. Those things happen
Absolutely.
because that's a relationship. That's how God is I mean, in the Bible, it says we're created in his image, right? So if we have a form, that means he has a form, because otherwise, how are we created in his image? Otherwise, we would be as omnipresent as the entire universe.
Exactly.
So that
Exactly.
means that saying right there just means that he is a person, and a person needs a relationship, you know, and his relationship is right there, and you know, for us to grab a hold of and, you know, connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just going through, I'm so glad I actually brought that up, because what you said about all the underlying reasons, like when you went for therapy, and you know, going through the mental hospital and all that stuff, you had to deal with the underlying reasons why you had all of these external representations of what was happening internally. That's how I like to see it. When I was smoking cigarettes, when I was doing things that were damaging me, I realized it's me not loving myself. So it's an external representation of the relationship I have with myself, and also the relationship I have with God. And so I'm manifesting it through this act of disrespect, through this act of like not loving myself. And so a lot of the time, the reason why we have the real deep core reason for our troubles is actually a disconnection from God. And and that you can trace. I mean, I do a lot of I do Reiki. So Reiki is like when Jesus lays hands, he helped the blind people, stuff like that. So I do something similar to what Jesus used to do. I'm not saying I am Jesus, but I work with people's energy in that same sense, you know. And I always come back, when I always speak to people, I always then bring them back to something spiritual. And I'm like, how is your spiritual life going? What are you doing to connect to yourself and to God in a deeper way? And how are you helping other people to do that? Because ultimately, that it's not going to take suffering away, but it's going to help you endure the suffering and become stronger. Because if you don't have that reason why, you don't have that purpose, you don't have that meaning for your life, any suffering is going to come and blow, and then your ship's just going to get blown off course, right? And that's not a man. That's not supposed to happen to a man. A man's supposed to stay his course, because his willpower, his connection to God should be stronger than any vice. It should be stronger than anything in this world. Ideally, obviously, we're not all there. I mean, I know I'm not there, and there's a lot of work to be done. But ultimately, that's where we should be going. The phrase in my culture, in my spiritual practice, is called, you get a sense of ruchi, a sense of taste for what a pure connection with God tastes like, and then nothing else tastes the same. So it's like, you know, you spit at the thought of having sex, you spit at the thought of doing anything other than just connecting purely with God, because that taste, once you taste that and you have that, it's like, man, nothing can compare to that in this world.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
If I give you the example of like, what's your favorite food? Like, you could, what would your favorite food be?
Probably pizza.
Pizza. Okay, good. I love pizza too. So you haven't had pizza in 2 years because you just decided, I'm going to do some austerities. I'm going to, you know, pack it away for a bit and just do something else with my time in that sense. I'll eat healthier. I'll eat different things. I just want to see what I can do without it, right? And then 2 years have gone by, and now you're like, okay, I'm gonna have some pizza. It's been 2 years. That's what I said I was gonna do. Now I'm just gonna come back and see how my relationship with this changed. So I sit you down and I'm like, here we go. Here's your favorite pizza, man. And you eat the whole thing, right? I would imagine. One go, one shot, bam. But now I bring you another one. And you're gonna be like, okay, it's been 2 years, right? Yes, I could pack away two. If not two, I could pack away at least half of this other pizza. But then I bring you another pizza. And then I bring you another pizza and another one and another one. And then eventually it's just like, man, like, it's only so satiating, you know? Even after 2 years of me staying away from this, these pizzas are only satiated me, could only do it so much. I couldn't get more satisfaction out of this right now because I'm full. And even though it's been 2 years, this is just like, ugh, like.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like the things in this world, right? The things in this world are like that. Like they only fill us up so much because you can only squeeze so much pleasure out of it. And then once you squeezed it and once you filled yourself up, that's it. Then you have to take a break for a bit and then you have to come back and you're like, well, yeah, the pleasure's back. But then you get to that point of being satiated again and you go and you come back. But a relationship with the divine, a relationship with God is not like that. It's ever pleasurable, it's ever filling, it's ever new, ever fresh, it's ever like youthful and joyful. And like when I think it's Paul and his associates go to jail. So this is a bit off topic but a bit on topic. They turn the whole situation from like this negative situation, I'm in jail, we're screwed, let's just mope around and be negative and depressed. They turned it around into a gospel, man. They were singing and they were jumping and they had ecstasy like all the time because they kept praising God. And that's what a pure relationship with God can be like, is that moment where it just keeps building and building and building and building and gets sweeter and deeper the more that we actually funnel into it. So we leave the material world alone and we just funnel down into our spiritual world, and then you start to see that the spiritual kingdom starts to open up to us, as opposed to if we just stay in the material side of things. You never get that sweetness, but at some point it does get thinner and smaller, but then it starts to open itself up again when we become cleaner and purer of mind and purer of heart at the end of the day.
No, for sure it is ever filling. God, it will always fill your cup up the way that the world cannot. Absolutely.
Because the world's not designed to do it. That's the thing.
No.
And no matter how hard we try, it's never going to do it. So we should just stop trying.
Exactly. It's just cheap pleasure, cheap dopamine that plays on our psychology, plays on our natural desire for those things.
Because I just did a previous podcast where I was speaking about something similar, and desire, it's not unhealthy to desire things. Desire, we even desire a relationship with God. That moment where you were at your wit's end and you're like, I've tried everything, but I haven't tried a relationship with you. There was a desire behind it. You're like, now let me see what I can do through this relationship, let me have a relationship. So desire is not unhealthy. It's just about using those desires, the useful ones, the healthy ones, and using them in service in some way or another, So
you desire to live, right? You desire to
we're here.
Create with a
we
family,
have to live.
Right?
There's no way around it.
You need shelter and food and water. You desire
to be a wife, you want a relationship, you want a kingdom, you want to build an online profile, you want to have a house, you want to have this, you want to have that.
Right. And I think it's just where, like, what do those desires, where do they come from, and how do you deal with them? How do you use them? And of course, serving others, that is a big part, is, servitude to others is a big part, I think, of not just, biblical masculinity, but masculinity in general, right? Of course.
Is there any other masculinity is the question, other than
exactly.
Spiritual, biblical, godly masculinity? I mean, at the end of the day, in my opinion, that is true masculinity, and every other shade of masculinity is just a shade. It's like a hue of the original masculinity. So is there any other masculinity out there?
Costume that you put on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that you put on for the world, but that is true biblical masculinity. I don't believe there's anything beyond that. That is the pinnacle. That is, for me, then should be striving to be like Jesus. He was the most masculine man on earth. He had restraint, power, all these things, and that's the pursuit of perfection. But of course, we'll never get there. But
he did say we could do everything he does and more.
Yeah.
So we can't. It's not impossible.
It's not possible to be perfect like he was, but to be like his human nature. We can definitely try to be his like his divine nature. Of course, it's not possible for us to become God, but to be like him, strive that ideal, that'll always be the ideal, right? Just because something's impossible to achieve doesn't mean you shouldn't still try to achieve it, right?
Mm.
You should always focus on the progression and try to be as far as you can by the time you leave this earth, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, man. So yeah, so we are again heading into our last 10 minutes of this second Zoom. So I think that's great for our session today, man. I don't know about you if you have anything more that you want to add, but if you don't, then I think I'm just gonna close it up and round it up, and then we can go from there, man.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you asking me all these questions. More than happy to share my experience. And the whole reason I made my page is really to just speak to younger Danny, because I know there's so many young men that are struggling. I hope less than I did, but I know there's ones that are struggling more than I did with some things, and I just want to be a beacon of light to show that if I could do it, you can do it. If I can go from being where I was to where I am now, which, it's not like I'm where I want to be, but the difference is quite night and day. And that's the whole point, is also just to be a real man and show my progression as I go with my Instagram. You look at my first post compared to my post now, you can see the progression of me, of my content, of so many things. And that's really the point, is to evolve with my followers, my clients, the people that I want to help in real time with them, right? So that I can only get better. I can only improve through the grace of God, and I can only help them do the same.
And I something for both myself to hear and for you to hear as well, is I think that people respond really well to authenticity. So speaking from a place of my experience and where I've come from and how I've, where I'm at and all that stuff, that definitely connects more than telling people you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and blah, blah, blah. Like I found that people don't really tend to listen to the rules, but they listen to someone who's really connecting, who's looking for a connection. So having that as the foundation of the way that we go forward, in my opinion, is definitely something that I found that really really excites people and gets people to want to know more, because if they see someone just saying all the rules and they're just preaching all like the facts, then it's sort of like it could be too standardized, here, and the people tend to look at, here I am and here's what this guy's saying, so I'm not even going to try, bro. Because how am I going to get from here to there? But if you talk about how you went from here to there, or from here to even closer, or just a little bit up, then people's like, damn, look at that guy, he's busy doing it and he's talking about it. And now, that excites me, because now I see you going from where you were and talking about how you got to where you are and the struggles that you faced and all of these things and blah, blah, blah. That makes me feel like that guy's a human. He's a spiritual man, but he's a human at the same time. And that's ultimately, I think, what people are looking for, is that real connection, because
Absolutely.
in my opinion, I don't think God would ever come down here and tell people, you shouldn't do this and look how bad you are. No. God will focus on the positives behind all the negatives, and he'll be like, but remember that, and remember this, even though there's so much negativity, and it is what it is, but remember who you are. Remember that you are a soul, you are connected to me, and I don't see you as all the negativity. I see you as all the positivity, all the things that you are doing, and to focus more on that as opposed to focusing on all the negatives, which, what we were saying, is that it tends to bring us further down. I do something that I know I shouldn't be doing, and then I beat myself up, and then I start doing more things that I shouldn't be doing, because I don't want to face the fact that I did it and it was a mistake, and I pick myself up and I carry on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a big part of moving forward, of healing and of growing, and learning to forgive ourselves is where it starts at the end of the day, because ultimately God is a forgiving God. you know? He sees
Absolutely.
everything
His
and he's just like,
mercy knows no bounds.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So no matter what we do, not that we should intentionally do bad things and then still expect to be forgiven, like you were saying, but like
Mhm.
it's okay to have faults. It's okay to be imperfect because that's just the way that you're designed. That's the way we're
Right.
designed. And that's ultimately what being a man, I think we all come to a point. I know I've come to a point is realizing just how faulty I am as a man, you know? And that helps me to have more respect for the people around me because I'm like, if I'm this faulty, like, man, just pick yourself up and carry on, bro. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. Just get up and go because there's so many people who are so much worse than you and all of these things. And I know my own faults and my own flaws. So in some ways, I'm way worse than what you're doing. And how what you're doing is not even that bad. So just,
Yeah,
don't focus on it and just carry on.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's all I have to add for today. I do thank you for coming on here, man, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Devin. I really appreciate it. And yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate the questions. And I
Yeah,
appreciate
same.
the chance to be able to share a little bit about myself here.
Cool, bro. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. God bless you, man. Yeah, and
God
your
bless, man.
journey, man. Yeah, God bless you and your journey, man. May people come to you, man, that need it, and may you help
Thank
them
you.
and also grow into a really authentic man of God, man.
Thank you, man. You as well.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, man. All the blessings matter.
Yeah, for sure.
Where would we be without the blessings, bro? Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you very much, man.
Take care, man. God bless.